What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the site. Today I'm going to be covering a video on lifting belts, so these things right here. Now, I woke up to a couple of messages this morning regarding a lifting belt, and I just thought, you know what, why not answer it in a YouTube video? So today I'm going to be sort of covering what these are, how they work, what benefits we can have from them, if you should use them and when you should use them if you should. So I'm going to start off by saying that if you are looking for a lifting belt, or at the end of this video if you do decide that you would like to use a lifting belt, the current favourite of mine is the Strength Shop Riot lifting belt here. This is the leather buckle belt. Now, I personally use both the 10mm and the 13mm belts. There is a discount code on the screen and they will be both linked in the description at the top of the description. So let's start off by thinking about actually what they are. So as you can see, it is a circular almost. Actually, this one is sort of this, it almost molds to like the shape of your midsection. But it is essentially usually leather or like artificial leather. I think this is artificial. And it is this sort of circular device that we use around our midsection in order to provide us with some stability of the spine, rigidity of sort of your midsection, so it allows us to reduce power leak, and also because it gives us something to brace against, we can actually generate more intra-abdominal pressure, which is obviously fantastic. We've covered the benefits of intra-abdominal pressure in the VALSALVA maneuver video linked in the description below these belts. So, do we need this lifting belt? Is it something that we need to be using within our training sessions? Well, the answer to that is very simple. No, we absolutely do not. The same way that we do not need knee sleeves, we do not need pre-workout, protein powders. It is one of those things that we can use to potentially advantage a variable. So in this case, we could potentially use that to advantage our strength profile along a series of exercises, maybe machinery, barbells, what have you. So in terms of getting a safer training environment, would this be beneficial? Potentially, but also potentially not. And this is something that people often don't consider. When we have a belt, we almost have this false sense of security in the sense of, oh, I've got a belt on, I can push it a bit further. Whereas with beltless training, so not using the belt, we would almost be more aware of the situation and be more careful with load selection, which obviously will then yield a more low risk environment from an injury perspective. So in terms of safety, you can and ah about it all day. In terms of strength, obviously as the benefits I just mentioned earlier in the video, in terms of the rigidity, the intra-abdominal pressure, obviously they're all going to yield more poundage on the bar. So from a strength perspective, I would recommend, should it meet the budget. So, you've watched this video up until this point, you have come to the conclusion that you are going to go and pick up a belt, hopefully one of these belts, and you have decided that you're going to get that. When should you actually wear it within your training session? Well, I'm going to apply two different scenarios here. We're going to look more from a powerlifting perspective and more from a bodybuilding perspective. So starting off with your powerlifting side of things, I would suggest that it is definitely in your best interest to have one of these in your gym bag. Whether you wear it every session or not, we can touch on that in a second, but I would say that having one of these in your gym bag is going to be in your best interest. Now, throughout the off season and even in the start of a prep, I would like to see you using the belt very, very sparingly and trying to do as much beltless training as you can. Now, of course, if you have a coach, you do what the coach asks you to do. This is advice for individuals who don't have a coach or are just sort of getting into training and wondering about whether or not they want to start using their belt. So, throughout an off season, as minimal as possible. Start a prep, I'd hold back. And over time, we introduce it gradually as we yield closer and closer to that meet. I'd like to see it in 100% of the time from 12 weeks out onwards. Some people will only prep for a meet for like 8 weeks. Personally, I do a lot longer. But from sort of 8 to 12 weeks out, I want to see that belt in every single session. Now, when it comes to your squat, bench and deadlift specifically, I'd always recommend it for your squat. I think it's huge. For deadlift, again, I'd probably recommend, although you might want to drop down a size, and by that I mean in terms of thickness, not physical belt size. So you may want, this is a 13mm, extra stiff, extra Riot thick belt. This is huge because I use this for squat and I like a big belt for a squat. With a deadlift, I would move down to a 10mm, so a slightly thinner belt. And for me, I think that it just digs in less and it's a bit more comfortable. With bench, genuinely, I wouldn't say that it's too big of a deal. It's kind of an and ah. If you get either an actual benefit or a placebo benefit from having your belt on when you bench, great, sure, have it. If you don't like it, don't, not a big deal. On the sessions where you are going to be using a belt, I would recommend introducing it from your final or penultimate warm-up, preferably the penultimate. I've always been a big believer that we have to get the warm-ups right. Now, a lot of people do like the benefit of adding in something as they get closer and closer to that top set. So for example, on the third final warm-up, they had their knee sleeves, then they had their belt, then they had their chalk and sniffing salts, what have you. And I get that, that's fine. It always makes you feel as though you've got more helping you, so it's not going to be as big of a jump as you think. I get that, but at the same time, I would rather you sort of equip yourself to execute that warm-up really, really well. Because let's say that you're going for a 200 kilo squat and you put your belt, your knee sleeves, you chalk, you approach the bar as though it was your top set with your final warm-up of 180, and it moves really, really well. Your mental approach going into that 200 is going to be so much better. And I don't care what anyone says, your mental approach is going to be significantly more important than your physical attire. So for me, I'd rather see the belt going in on the penultimate warm-up. As I mentioned on the knee sleeve video, I'd rather see them going in from the first warm-up. The knee sleeve video will also be linked in the description. And so I'd try and get it in your penultimate warm-up as a minimum, final warm-up as a minimum, penultimate preferable is what I meant to say there. In terms of your assistance, accessory, variances, I think it very much depends on the variant and the individual. I wouldn't be too harmed if you were using one for that, but I like the assistance and accessory stuff. I'd want to keep it sparing and only really use where you need to. From a bodybuilding perspective, we can have a little bit more of a relaxed approach, because bodybuilding as a collective, nationwide or worldwide even, is seen a little bit differently to powerlifting in the sense of it doesn't seem to be much load lifted. I actually think to be a successful bodybuilder, you have to shift a lot of load, because good luck building density on 4x10s on a rope push down. It's just not going to happen, or if it is, it's not going to happen to the extent that you would want it to, should you be chasing some really serious bodybuilding goals. And so with that being said, for those sets where you are going to take, you know, those big numbers, for example, if you want to dense back and you're not having a heavily loaded hip hinge, unless you're a genetic freak, good luck to you. I would obviously want that within the program for 95% of the population, and therefore there may be an argument that, you know, one of these is going to be really, really useful. You may not need an extra stiff 13mm belt. You probably be able to get away with 10mm. You may even be able to get away with a little prong belt, or even sort of your very cheap, you know, introductory RDX kind of belts. But I would sort of have it in the back of your mind that if you are going to be loading heavy hip hinges, heavy squats, or even something like maybe a heavy pendulum, or you know, some form of heavy compound lift, where bracing, breathing, and all that sort of stuff is really important, it's probably in your best interest to at least somewhat consider the idea of using a belt. Finally then, I'm going to show you how I use the belt. It's very, very, very simple. There isn't really much to using a belt. I've got a jumper on right now, so I'm not sure this is even going to fit. A little tool that I'm actually going to kind of give away here that a lot of people don't use is on some belts you can actually clip just one of the holes. So let me come a bit closer here. So you've got two of these kind of points here, and they're meant to fit in these 2 points here. So normal practice would see them going in like that and locking in. Some belts, I know for sure that the Strength Shop 10mm belt allows you to do this. You can actually load on one. So I used like that. This one doesn't do it for some reason. No, not really sure why. But on some of them you can do that. So what I would recommend there is using the single clip on kind of your penultimate warm-up and then moving to your final clip on the top warm-up. That way you're always going to be using a belt, but you're still getting that little jump and the little sort of subconscious view that, oh, I'm getting more help this time. And obviously that does play its part, to be honest. It is quite a big factor. So that's again something to consider if you can do that with your belt. So in terms of, I actually wear mine upside down. You've probably noticed if you wear a belt, this is upside down. It's just kind of the way that I wear it. I like to flick to the right. I imagine I am the only person in the world that does that, but it's just the what I've always done. I think when I first put it on, I wore it upside down and I haven't changed since. But this works for me. I enjoy doing this. I like a little flick with my right hand. Most people will obviously be doing it with their left hand. I guess it doesn't really matter, whatever's comfortable. But you just kind of pull, and I'm not going to get this tight and shut now, am I? Lock it in. Now I have got something to breathe and brace against. I will do my squat set or whatever it is that I'm doing. Ping, and I'm done. And then to take it off, I just pull out and done. So that is how we use a belt. This, as you can see, look how stiff it is. Hang on. Look how stiff it is. It holds itself in a position for the most part. It doesn't even close. So yeah, there is a very generic overlook across lifting belts. My take home would be, if you are going to, or if you are wanting to be strong in any aspect, at least consider the use of a belt. Trial your friends, see how it feels, but be sparing with the use where you can, because there are many benefits to beltless training. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next video.